Hello, this is Trainboy 9705 and you are watching a Northwestern special. The steam engine for its type is the fastest land vehicle. And the steam team are the power behind freight and express services that make up the Northwestern Railway. This is the Northwestern Adventures. Told you, I have very likely talked about engines backstories like Henry and Glenn. But I haven't gave much greater detail. I thought now is a better time to tell you the history of Sodor. At least until 1925, which is where the series is at right now. So let's begin with first attempt with a railway on the southeast side of Sodor. The railroad was a small plateway that went into the towns of Wardfell and Balladwale. It was built in 1806. It never owned any engine, but it had people and horses taking people and goods from the small towns. It wasn't very successful and had to close 4 years later in 1810. Although not very remembered nowadays, this became the start of Sodor's many railways. But before I talk about any of those railways, let's talk about an event that happened almost 20 years later that changed steam engines forever. In 1829, there was a race between 5 engines and the winner would become the engine that ran the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. But something you would say magical happened to one of the engines. Stephenson's rocket was built, and when he first moved, he came to life. Stephenson's rocket ended up winning the race. But this became a new beginning for steam engines and life in general. This would inspire a company to make living engines. The first well-known railway on Sodor began in 1853 as the Sodor and Mainland Company wanted to make a line with only living engines. They built engines, and if they did not come to life, they scrapped it. In 1856, they finally built 3 living engines: Clive, Neil, and Matthew. The line had 5 stations: Kirkronan, Rolfs Castle, Kelsthorpe Road, Crovansgate and Ballahu. Sadly, the S&N Railway never made it to the mainland. In the mid-1890s the S&M tried to build Vicarstown Bridge, but they were bankrupt by this and closed in 1901. Clive and Matthew were scrapped in 1902 and Neil went to work in Nafford Harbour, where he continues to work to this day. The Skarloey Railway is the island's first narrow-gauge railway and also the oldest still running. The line built living engines and rolling stock in 1864 and 1865. These were Skarloey, Renius, Agnes, Ruth, Lucy, Jemima, and Beatrice. The railway opened in the summer of 1865. The line had 5 stations at this time: Crovansgate, Cross NYQ Erne, Glennock, and the stations named after the first 2 engines. Eventually work became too hard for the 2 engines to handle, so Proteus was bought by the line in 1878. The Wellsworth and Suddery Railway opened in 1870. There were 4 engines on the line: Colin, Lily, Adam, and Timothy. The line had 4 stations: Crosby, Wellsworth, Suddery, and Brentham. The W&S merged with another railway in 1912. But before I talk about that, I will talk about another narrow-gauge railway. Work on the Mid Sodor Railway began in 1872. Skarloey and journeys would take turns being transported to help build the MSR. This is the main reason Proteus arrived in 1878. They finally built a permanent engine for the line in 1879. His name was Duke. He was named after the Duke of Sodor, who Duke called his grace. Duke was shipped in October 1880, which is when the line opened. Duke arrived with two other engines named Crimson and Bertram. For the next 19 years, Duke, Bertram and Crimson worked hard taking passengers around. In 1899 two more engines were sent when the mines were built, Atlas and Alfred. In 1904, two new engines arrived when Duke, Bertram and Crimson were getting too old, Falcon and Albert. Crimson was scrapped after Falcon arrived, as Crimson was too old and expensive for the AMSR to maintain. In 1910, Jim was bought to pull goods trains. In 1914, two engines were sent to give supplies to the standard gauge, which was involved in the First World War. Their names are Tim and Sid. The last engines to arrive are Stewart and Stanley in 1920. Stanley ended up becoming a generator by 1924. There are 9 stations: Arlesburg Bridge Street, Arlesburg West, Fark Road, Marthwaite, Arlesdale Green, Arlesdale, Cassenwyhoen, Ulfstead Road and Ballymoney. Most of the info here was already seen in the episode Branch Lines, so I won't talk much about that. Basically, the line opened in 1883. The line had 4 engines: Glenn, Flynn, Linda, and George. Flynn, Linda and George were killed in the First World War. After the war, Glenn worked the Farquhar branch alone until Thomas arrived on the line in 1924. What I didn't mention was that in 1912, when it merged with the Wellsworth and Suddery Railway and became the Tidemouth, Nafford, and Elsbridge Light Railway. The line had 5 stations: Tidemouth, Nafford, Dryall, Tory Wreck, and Elsbridge. Construction on the Culdefell Railway began in 1897. The line opened in 1900. The line had 5 engines: Godred, Ernest, Wilfred, Culdee, and Shane Dooney. Godred was killed in an accident on the line's opening day in 1900. The line had 5 stations: Kirkmucken, Shiloh, Skarloey Road, Devil's Back and Culdefell. The First World War happened from 1914 to 1918. It affected some more than others. For strategic reasons, the former S&M and the TKNDL decided to merge to create the Northwestern Railway. Thomas and Edward arrived in 1915 to help. After the war ended, the two didn't want to leave. The two were bought by the NWR in 1920 and 1921 respectively. Henry, Eagle, 87546 and 98462 arrived in 1922. Gordon arrived in 1923. 98462 was destroyed in 1924, and that's the reason that Emily arrived on Sodor. James arrived to replace 98462 that same year. The last two to arrive are Wendell and Lady in 1925. That is the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed. This is Trainboy 9705 saying goodbye everyone.